Welcome. We're back. I'm Heston Cherry, and this is our show, Addiction Recovery Resources and Capital HOPE Hope. I've got a guest today. His name is Mark Jorgensen. He's a friend, a good friend, and he's also the owner of Desert Solace Recovery, and they specialize in pornography addiction, which is running rampant in this country. There's billions and billions of dollar industry, and he's gonna get us educated on that stuff, and we're excited. I always learn from him, and I always learn stuff to teach my children. And his wife is also awesome, Jerry, but she's not here. She'll be here soon, one of these shows. But Mark just celebrated his 7th year at Desert Solace, so they've been in the business a while, and we're excited once again to have him here. And Mark, today we're going to talk about the step 4 in the AA 12-step, the LDS 12-step, Al-Anon kind of, and what they say is make a searching and fearless written moral inventory of yourself, and that's the LDS one. And the big key word for me in that one is written, because for me, if you don't write it down, it's not real. But it's all programs help, like I've always said. AA says, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And that's the direction we're going to go today, kind of educating people on pornography addiction, and kind of stick to step 4 if you can. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be with you, Heston. Appreciate you inviting me to join you.
Yep.
Well, pornography addiction is something that's kind of interesting that obviously a lot of people in the world, I've had a lot of conversations with people that don't believe that that's a real thing, that it's a harmless pastime. It's not really something that is addictive. And I think to address the question, maybe the best thing to do is just kind of step back and define addiction. What is addiction? Realistically, there's a lot of things people are addicted to. And in some sense, everyone has some sort of an addiction. An author I respect a lot, Brene Brown, defined addiction as chronic and compulsive numbing. And we all do that to an extent. And some people might do that through drugs and alcohol. A lot of people do it through sexual fantasy and pornography. And some people do it through Facebook, or some people do it through shopping, or even working out.
Their favorite drink every day.
Or eating. Eating is certainly something that people are addicted to, but just a way to check out and just to numb and to self-medicate. I had a good friend whose mother was literally carted off to the mental institution because she would sit and read scriptures for 16 to 18 hours a day to the neglect of her health and her hygiene and her family and everything. But she just was not willing to face life. But so we all numb out. We all want to check out. And so pornography addiction, I mean, the biggest challenges with what we typically refer to as addictions, drugs and alcohol, is that, and reason they're more recognized and maybe more serious is because of the potential consequences, and for the fact they're just not as socially acceptable. Let's just be honest. Yeah. And to me, pornography addiction falls into that case. I really, what I've learned to do with people that want to argue with me about, well, that's not really an addiction, you can't overdose from it, it's, there's no chemical component. Well, okay, I really don't want to argue with you about it, but it does deliver a chemical hit to the brain. It does deliver a massive surge of chemicals and dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin and all these feel-good chemicals, and the brain craves that and it wants more. And that's just what happens to the body when chemicals are injected into it, is the body wants more. And so maybe technically it's not, but it is absolutely something that people bring into their lives such that their lives become unmanageable, which is how the 12 steps define
it's
addiction.
Just like addiction to drugs and alcohol. I always say if it starts to create an appetite for itself, and you need more and more to get that same feeling or never get that feeling again, and you're always chasing that feeling, pornography falls into that same realm. You're always trying to get more and more. And where do those levels, where does the what was I going to say, progression go in is it starts looking at a picture, and then how far does it get?
Well, that's a great question. In the drug world, people are usually introduced to it through a gateway drug, maybe drinking with friends at a young age, or smoking pot or something like that. And like you said, there comes to a point where you get more and more. I've gone through a recovery journey of my own. That's what led me to start Desert Solace. I was exposed to, at my age, all that was available as a young teenager was magazines. Mm-hmm. And I don't even know if those are out there anymore, just because the internet is so prevalent and accessible. But as people are exposed to pornography, and there reaches a point where a Playboy magazine just is not going to give them the same hit, right, quote unquote. And that's where they'll go into darker forms of pornography and more bizarre forms of pornography. That's where they start to act out with others, and that can lead to a full-blown sexual addiction, where they might be serial one-night stands or serial affairs, and that's where health is at risk. That's where relationships are at risk, and relationships are damaged. That's where people might even go down a very dark place of things like child pornography.
Absolutely.
No one intends to go that direction. No one intends to be a heroin junkie in the street with a needle in their arm, but no one also intends to be, picked up by the FBI because they're looking at child pornography.
Absolutely.
But just the bizarre nature of it is such that they and the illicit nature of it and the illegality of it creates an adrenaline rush that is kind of produces those same feelings, and as you know, an addict doesn't really think. An addict just acts, right, and responds to the cravings. And I've known a lot of people that have been caught in that trap, and they really don't even realize what a dark path they've gone down until, like I say, the FBI is knocking on their door, and they just get
or else their marriage is ruined.
Oh yeah,
that's to me the addictions that for me are definitely where it means you've got a problem is when it affects your relationships with family members or your spouse or your significant other or something. When you're hiding stuff, when there's all those behaviors that come with addictions, that you lie and you cheat and you try to hide stuff and you're running around. That's part of that. That's the addiction itself. Like Taz Decker said, the insanity of it.
Mm-hmm. And this certainly falls into that category. And addiction is also about that disconnection, where the addiction, the drug of choice, whatever that might be, is where your focus is, and you lose that connection with your loved ones, with yourself, with God, if your spiritual relationship is damaged, and all you're focused on is that addiction, and all the isolating, and of course that just feeds the addiction and begins that vicious cycle.
What Mark is important to you with pornography? We're kind of basing this day on pornography addiction. Is what's the most important part of step 4? That is a necessity to put in step 4?
Just making that inventory of our character weaknesses, because addiction is a way to numb out from uncomfortable feelings, and stuff happens to us, and we have experiences in life. We experience frustration, we experience sadness, anger, hurt, discouragement, and all those quote unquote negative emotions that we don't like. They're not uncomfortable, and we don't like to experience them, and so we want to numb out from them. And that's where addiction breeds. And so by identifying what those are, what are those character weaknesses? What are those things about us that we are not comfortable with? What are those things about ourselves that we want to improve, that we want to shift? And by actually putting those on paper, and I do like that distinction you mentioned about writing them down and making them tangible so we can acknowledge them, and that is such a huge part of making that shift in our lives, because how can we overcome something that we're not even willing to acknowledge exists?
Absolutely. And in my addiction, when I did step 4, I wrote on a yellow legal pad, and I think I used about 3 or 4 of them, front and backs of the papers. In my hand, I hadn't written in 20-something years,
Okay.
so my hand cramped constantly, and things would come to my brain. I'm just writing faster, and my brain's thinking faster than I can write. But after going back over that in step 5 and reading it, that's where I figured out where my character weaknesses were. That without writing it down, I wouldn't have realized you're a cheater. You're a liar. You have anger issues that you need to get under control.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And step 4 is so critical in beginning that recovery process, because until we know what it is about ourselves and why we're going to addiction and why we're hiding, we won't make that shift. We'll just stay stuck in that cycle.
I agree. I've been a part of the 12-step program. I've mastered it, and it's my way of life. I always tell people I live my life in numbers 1 through 12, and that's how I deal with life. I'm not good at life, and so I just live it by a number. But a lot of people I see try to go from step 3 to step 6. And I think that's the most devastating thing they can do is skip a step. They're in order divinely to help people succeed, and then you'll see people, I'm done with step 10, and they'll have a relapse, and they'll realize later, they come back a year later and they're like, I didn't do step 4. And so it's my advice to no matter how hard it is, get it done. Well,
the reason they skip it is because it is probably the most uncomfortable, and it's not comfortable to look at ourselves, to look at our flaws. We don't like that. We don't like to acknowledge that we're not perfect. We don't like to acknowledge that we've got weaknesses, and it's hard to look at them. And yes, people will either skip it entirely or just not go deep. They'll just look at they'll write down some superficial things and says, yeah, I got some anger issues, whatever, but they don't really look at the hard stuff. That's
right. I agree with that. Mark, do you have any numbers for pornography? Give us some percentages or numbers of people out there, and what, I know I've heard for LDS kids going out on missions that pornography is their number one reason they come back early, and because they didn't deal with it before they went, and they thought that doing that, or I see a lot of people get married thinking that's going to stop them from their pornography addiction, and it ultimately catches up with them later. But what are some percentages? What's out there? I've heard it said that kids under the age of 18 are gonna, they have 100% chance of viewing pornography before they're 18.
Well, you just answered my question. Yes, the exposure rate to 18-year-old kids is 100%. Now that doesn't mean 100% have an addiction or have a serious involvement in it. Yeah. But that question about marriage, that's a whole nother topic we could go deep into, and maybe we will address that. But sticking to statistics, it is so prevalent, it is so out there. Pop-ups on computers and cable television with 1,000 channels, and people are going to be channel surfing. They're going to be internet surfing, and kids are going to run into pornography. That's just the fact of the reality of today's world.
What age do we start teaching kids about pornography?
I don't think you're ever too young.
That's the way I think.
Yeah, the kids, because kids are so technologically savvy and they're on the same technology that I just mentioned, they are going to see it. And it's interesting about young kids is they haven't developed that shame around pornography yet. Sometimes mom and dad's uncomfortability around the topic are really what kids
piques their interest.
Yeah, kids just see they're just naked people. I mean, what's okay? Yeah, right. I have all these body parts. What's the big deal? And
sure.
But when they see mom and dad freak out, and that's I'll kind of tell on myself a little bit. I as a parent, I didn't handle this well the first time it happened. The first time I knew that we had kids looking at pornography or had been exposed to it, I handled that 100%, 180 degrees wrong. Just couldn't have done it worse.
Freaked out.
What are you doing? Get out! Why are you doing this? And I had my own shame around my own stories, so that's what was driving me. And these poor kids, and all that did to them is just determine that I'm going to be much more careful. I'm never going to bring this up. I'm never going to talk about it.
Yeah, then they don't feel comfortable bringing things to you anymore. So no matter how mad you get, don't overreact.
Don't show it. Put on your best poker face and say, hey, okay, I understand that, the curiosity is natural and obviously age appropriate, and that's leads
filter it.
Yeah, and the conversation around sexuality is a constant thing. A lot of people, our culture, we talk about the talk, and we're going to sit down and have the talk. Well, the talk is an ongoing talk. It's just a conversation, and it just has to keep going. It can't just be a one-time. Here's the birds and the bees, and here's the facts of life, and then heave a sigh of relief that that's over with and never have to address that again. Because they're still in the world, they're still going to be exposed, and it's only natural that it will pique their interest.
We've told our kids, it's already happened. One of our boys that he was exposed to it at school. A kid took it in the bathroom, and principal come in and saw it, and we discussed it, and it was a good family topic, and we always discuss it as our family. We're open with our kids. We have a plan for them. If they see it, they know exactly what they're going to do, and it'll be their choice ultimately. But we're told them to shut the computer, turn it off, come tell us, and we can talk about it and what they saw, and then we'll just go from there. But I think the biggest key is don't overreact. That
is by far the biggest key, and and parents aren't perfect, and my kids and I have a very good relationship around topics of sexuality right now, and so you can recover if you blow it. I'm proof of that. It's okay to. We're human, and we're going to make mistakes, and no parent is perfect. But just
I don't know about that.
Keep the conversation going, even if it isn't handled perfectly.
Understood.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mark, you've had Desert Solace open for 7 years now, and then you and Jerry run it, right? Correct, your wife. And where are these people coming from that come to your facility?
Honestly, they're coming from all over the world. We've had it mostly from the Western United States, but we've had a lot from back east in the Midwest, Texas and Canada. We've had one from England, Brazil, Panama. So they're coming from all over the world, and I think that's just because we're unique in what we do.
Sure.
In everyone recognizes the concept of a drug rehab is familiar to everyone, but it wasn't always. It wasn't, that was a new concept 30, 40 years ago. And this is kind of the same thing. We believe and acknowledge that it is every bit as addictive as any other substance.
I've been in these meetings, and there is no doubt that it's any.
Yeah.
I've even heard from individuals that I don't know how you compare it, but they say it's worse than a heroin addict trying to get off heroin because it's so accessible.
Yeah, it is.
They're always going to have a phone.
Exactly.
They're always going to have a computer because that's the world we live in, and they have to be able to say no. The drug addict and the alcoholic have to choose to go to the store or choose to go to the guy down the street who's has 50 cars in his driveway at all times at 12, whatever. Anyway, you know what I'm getting at. But we have to make a choice, and for pornography, really, they can be anywhere at any time and choose to fasten it.
Absolutely, yeah. It is wildly accessible, and so the whole idea of inpatient treatment, and we subscribe to it too, is people go to inpatient treatment to get away from access. And that's what we provide. We give them a chance to come and have a very structured program where they're not going to have electronics. They're not going to have access to the internet. They're going to be busy. Yeah. And it just gives their brain a chance to detox. And, it's not a literal detox in the sense of getting a substance out of a system, but in a sense it is because the brain is still craving that hit.
Addiction is a brain disease.
Yeah.
It's known as that through the medical field. And so, to me, the disease they're going to have to deal with certain things, and to be able to deal with those things, I think being in a program where it teaches you, so you have time to figure out what your character defects are, what your behavior's problems are, and someone can point those out to you rather than you trying to do it on your own. Because drug addiction, and it's not. I figured out, 25 years. I knew I had a problem the last 15 years,
Mm-hmm.
but it was, I always thought it was a willpower thing. Oh, I'm
Yeah.
strong enough to
Just
quit this
suck it
whenever
up.
I want. I can
Yeah.
do it.
Absolutely. And that's the second half, of course, of the treatment process is once you get your brain clear so you can think,
Yeah.
then you can figure out what's driving the addiction. And another thing, you brought up the idea of a brain disease.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes back to that topic of these people that think, well, if I get married or whatever, and I have, access to sexuality whenever I want, well, it's not about sex. It's about escaping and numbing out. And, oftentimes marriage happens, and maybe we're going a little bit sideways in this, but I think it's important to get this out. But,
Yeah.
because that's a very, very common story we hear is guys struggle with this as youth and college years, and they get married and think, well, now I can have sex whenever I want, so I'm going to be good. And pretty soon they're right back into it because it's not about that, because marriage is tough. Marriage is trying to see eye to eye with someone. You don't have the same opinions, and
And the stress is what brings you to your addiction.
and the stress is what gets the brain going. I want to numb this. I want to escape this. I don't want to deal with this. And the brain wants to escape. And if you've had a history with addiction, it's going to right back to that.
Right. And I think another thing to point out about pornography addiction, I've met many people, is just like drug and alcohol addiction. It does not discriminate. You've got very, very successful people that become addicted, and it ruins their lives. And just like, everyone thinks drug addicts or they're in the gutter. They never were successful. They're not intelligent people. And I think absolutely the opposite. They're very intelligent people, and almost too sensitive and too intelligent that they, like you said, run and numb out.
Absolutely. People talk about the functioning drug addict or the functioning alcoholic, and a lot of people do. And certainly there's a lot of people that lead productive lives and function in society that look at porn and maybe even look at a lot of pornography. Mm-hmm. But eventually, in my own case, it took me, I got involved this as a teenager, and I was involved for 30 years. And I swore I was never going to tell a soul. I mean, my shame was so deep around that I was never going to tell anyone. And it took a complete financial collapse. And that basically resulted of me trusting people I shouldn't trust and making poor decisions because I didn't trust myself, and I wasn't willing to trust my gut and making bad decisions. And it led to a complete financial collapse. And at that point, when that was my rock bottom. In addiction, we talk about the rock bottom. That was my rock bottom. That I got to acknowledge this and deal with it. And that's where I started my own recovery journey, and that's where I went to residential treatment and got a chance to look at myself and just focus on myself. And I come out of there knowing what I wanted to do, and that's when we started Desert Solace to help other people struggling with the same thing.
Right. You and your wife, Jerry, I've never met two more passionate people about, well, a lot of recovery people, it give back so much.
There's a lot of passion in this world.
There's a lot, but you two have a lot of passion for what you do. And Jerry, she's outspoken, and she's not sensitive, or what I said, this is kind of a taboo subject. Well, she's you go around people and you hear the word pornography, like you told me the other day at lunch, you're like, and people walk the other way. Mm-hmm. They're like, oh, I don't need to listen to this stuff. It's like they don't want to talk about it, but it's real, and it's affecting how many billions of dollars go into this industry.
I don't know the numbers. It's huge. It is so prevalent and so accessible, and like I said earlier, unfortunately, too much of the world doesn't see it as the problem it is. It doesn't see how it can wreck relationships, and I've got a lot of anecdotal evidence to dispute that notion. I promise.
Yeah, and a lot more than just you.
Right.
I've seen many of these people and talked to many of these people.
Absolutely.
So that's amazing. Where are you going with? Let me ask you this: spouses, how do they help if they don't have a problem? How do they help their loved one? If they're being supportive and they want to help, how can they help? Are they actually enabling? Are they part of the problem?
They can be. They can be. A spouse is affected very deeply by this. as you could imagine.
Yeah. I can't imagine.
Especially as it escalates, and it's not uncommon at all for as people are not getting that same buzz that they used to get from pornography to start to seek out other people and to seek out affairs and one night stands and hookups and all that. And obviously that's devastating to a spouse and just that betrayal and just it can be devastating. And as we see couples work through this, the best thing a spouse can do to help their recovering addict husband is to, and by the way, I should mention too that this is becoming a growing problem among women. It's traditionally considered a problem with men, but there's a growing problem with women. But for right now, we only do treat men. But as the best thing a wife can do is to separate herself from blame and pointing fingers at herself for the addiction. We tell wives all the time, look, you didn't cause it, you can't control it, and you can't cure it. The best thing you can do for yourself is get yourself healthy and to recognize that you're not the cause of this and to get yourself emotionally healthy, let him get emotionally healthy, and then two emotionally healthy people can build an emotionally healthy relationship.
Great point.
So that's
I love that about Desert Solace is you guys advertise it in your advertising that it's a family problem, and you guys help the family also. It isn't just the people that come to your facility and stay. You're taking phone calls from their wives and answering questions. How can I help the kids while they're not here? And I think that's very, very admirable.
Yeah, the wives are involved in the whole process. They Jerry hosts a support conference call with the wives once a week. That's very effective. We do have the families come in once a month to spend a weekend with their loved ones to do some family therapy together, to do some activities, and to learn to reconnect and get some education. That's a very powerful part of the program. So that they're involved in the whole process along the way, and then of course they're encouraged to seek out their own help, whether that be in the form of a therapist or ecclesiastical leader, whatever that might be. But to get some help for yourself and take care of you first, so you can be healthy to support your loved one.
Yeah, I can't imagine because of alcohol and drug addiction leads to so many divorces. But that's kind of that's a tough one on a marriage. It's got to be for the wife to be just going like, how do they not love me? Why would he be looking elsewhere? Why didn't he not deal with this? And that's just it's devastating. And that's why I believe that, and I say this all the time, and it's my opinion, but I believe addiction is Satan's number one tool on the face of this earth in these days. I think addiction destroys because I believe the number one thing to God is family. Mm-hmm. And to me, and so what does Satan want to do? He wants to destroy the family, and I think that's take it for what it is.
And especially the intimacy aspect of sexuality within a marriage, when that is betrayed, that's a very quick way to destroy that family relationship. So I agree with you. That's a huge tool.
Right. Well, Mark, I appreciate you coming on the show, and
my pleasure.
And we're gonna have your wife on here soon too, if she will. I'll have to ask her. I guess I shouldn't say we're gonna have her on because if she says no, but she's so talkative.
She likes to talk. Yeah, she'll be fun.
I bet she'd come on. But Desert Solace, how do you get a hold of you?
You can reach us at our website is desertsolace.com. Everybody knows the W's by now. I don't have to.
Right.
It gets redundant. Desert Solace, SOLACE. Some people want to spell that with an I, but it's desertsolace.com.
Yeah.
Or I can be reached directly to answer questions. It's okay. Want me to give my number? It's 435. It's 817-1351.
Nice. Well, once again, I thank you for coming on. And the Desert Solace is a beautiful place up above Snow Canyon, across from the ledges. It's just a gorgeous facility, and they get to be around equine therapy with the horses, and it's a wonderful place, and it helps so many. And that's what we're trying to do, is get the word out about different addictions and resources to get help, and most importantly to bring hope when people are hopeless. And we'll talk to you next Monday.